Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. With respect to cess, which of the following statements are correct? It can be levied on both indirect and direct taxes. If the cess collected in a particular year goes unspent, it cannot be allocated to other purposes. The central government does not need to share the cess with the state government either partially or in full. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the cess collections. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the cess, what is a cess? This is a form of a tax. This tax is levied in addition to the tax. Let's say, for example, you are a person who's drawing a salary. You are drawing, let's say, about 5 lakhs or about 6 lakhs. So you're already levied what is called as the direct tax. In spite of levying some taxes on you, in addition to the existing tax, there is a new tax that is added, which is called as a cess. Similarly, it can also be indirect as well. So the first statement, it can be levied on both indirect and direct taxes, is the right statement. So cess is a form of a tax that is charged or levied over the base tax liability of a taxpayer. Second statement says, if the cess collected in a particular year goes unspent, it cannot be allocated for other purposes. This statement is also right. When it comes to cess, we have different kinds of cess. Let's say, for example, the government has levied education cess. This education cess levied by the government can only be used for the education purposes. If it is used for the sanitation, it can only be used for the sanitation. So what we have is a cess imposed by the government which can be used only for that purpose. If the cess is imposed for education, it cannot be used for sanitation. If the cess is imposed for sanitation, it cannot be used for diverted for any other purposes. And when the tax is collected and if it is unspent for that year, even in the next year as well, it can only be used for that specific purpose for which it was raised. So the second statement is also right. The third statement says the central government does not need to share the cess with the state government either partially or in full. This statement once again is right. When we collect the cesses, the central government need not have to share it with the state government. When it comes to the taxes, what we have is the central government which has to share the taxes with the state government. But when it comes to the cesses, they need not have to share it, which is why some of the states also allege that the central government is also imposing a lot of cesses and they are not transferring, and as a result it is violating some of the federal principles allege the state governments as well. So remember, these can be very important from the preliminary examination point of view. So all the statements are right. The answer to this would be 1, 2 and 3. Now let's look into the next practice question. India's largest floating solar power project is in the state of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Telangana. The answer to this is Telangana. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the PIB makes a reference to India's largest floating solar power project which is commissioned. So India's largest floating solar power project is now fully operational where in the Ramagundam in the state of Telangana. So remember, the largest floating solar power project is in the state of Telangana. What are the advantages from this particular project? From the environment point of view, the most obvious advantage is minimum land requirement, mostly for associated evacuation arrangements. And when we are speaking about the floating solar panels, this will also prevent the evaporation of the water. This will help in water conservation as well. And at the same time, it will also help in maintaining ambient temperature, thereby improving their efficiency as well as their generation. So remember, India's largest floating solar power project is in the state of Telangana, where in Ramagundam in Telangana. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which amongst the following cabinet committees is headed by the Union Minister of Home Affairs? Cabinet Committee on Security, Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, Cabinet Committee on Accommodation. The answer to this is Cabinet Committee on Accommodation. What are these cabinet committees? The cabinet committees are basically extra constitutional in nature. What do we mean by extra constitutional? It means they are not mentioned in the Constitution of India. So it is the rules of business which provide for their formation, and they are established by the Prime Minister as per the exigencies. When it comes to the cabinet committee, there are two types of cabinet committee. One happens to be the standing committee, which is permanent in nature. The other happens to be ad hoc in nature, which are created as per the requirements of that particular scenario. So basically, when we speak about the cabinet committees, their membership varies from 3 to 8. They usually include only cabinet ministers. Non-cabinet ministers can also be included as members. Apart from the ministers in charge of the subjects covered, other senior ministers can also be included as members. Which are the cabinet committees we have? We have the Appointments Committee, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs, Cabinet Committee on Investment and Growth, Cabinet Committee on Security, Cabinet Committee on Parliamentary Affairs, Cabinet Committee on Employment and Skill Development, Cabinet Committee on Accommodation. And when it comes to Cabinet Committee on Accommodation, we have the Minister of Home Affairs who is heading the Cabinet Committee on Accommodation. Generally, it is the Prime Minister who heads most of these cabinet committees, but remember there are other ministers as well who can head one of the cabinet committees. So the Cabinet Committee on Accommodation is headed by the Home Minister, and as part of the assignment you have to put on the comment section, is there any other cabinet committee which is headed by some other ministers apart from the Prime Minister? If it is the Prime Minister who is heading the cabinet committee, he will take care of the affairs of that committee. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to government bonds. They are issued at a discounted price. They are issued with a maturity of 1 year or less. Which of the statements given above are correct? The answer to this is none. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Indian Express makes a reference to the G-Sec yields. Let us try and understand what are the differences between treasury bills as well as the treasury bonds. When we speak about G-Secs, this can be broadly categorized into treasury bills as well as the treasury bonds. The treasury bonds are also called as the government bonds. The government bonds are the ones which are released by the government of the states or the government of the Union of India, which can be given for more than 1 year. But when it comes to treasury bills, it is 91-day bill, 182-day bill, or a 384-day bill, and it is usually less than 1 year. So when it comes to treasury bills, it is usually less than 1 year, but when it comes to T bonds, they are long-term bonds where it is for more than 1 year. When it comes to the options, they are issued at a discounted price. This is a wrong statement. So the T bills are issued at a discounted price and it is not the government bonds. So the first statement is wrong. When you look into the second statement, they are issued with a maturity of 1 year or less. This is once again to do with the T-bills and it is not to do with the government bonds. Since both the statements are wrong, the answer to this would be none. Now let us look at some of the important differences. When it comes to T-bills, they are transient money market instruments that are issued by the public authority, and T-bonds are long-term capital market instruments that are issued by the public authority. So these are long-term in nature. Cost change exceptionally less since it matures quicker than expected. Cost varies more in bonds because of the longer maturity time frame. When it comes to payment of interest, T-bills is issued at a discounted price, but T-bonds are not issued at a discounted cost but pay interest twice a year and pay face value at the maturity. Period to maturity, they are issued with a maturity of 1 year or less, and T-bonds are issued with a maturity equivalent to or over 10 years. These are some of the important differences between the treasury bills as well as the treasury bonds. Now let's look into the next practice question. Rapid financing instrument and rapid credit facility are related to provisions of lending by which one of the following? Asian Development Bank, International Monetary Fund, United Nations Environmental Program Finance Initiative, World Bank. The answer to this is International Monetary Fund. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2022. So remember the rapid financing instrument and Rapid Credit Facility are initiatives of the International Monetary Fund. When we speak about the Rapid Financing Instrument, it provides rapid financial assistance which is available to all the members of the IMF who are facing an urgent balance of payment needs. So in case they require urgent money and this is to do with balance of payments issue, they immediately can contact the IMF. So this RFI was created by the International Monetary Fund. Then we have the Rapid Credit Facility, which provides rapid concessional financial assistance to all the low income countries facing an urgent balance of payments need, and this was created under the IMF's Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is Pradhana Mantri formalization of micro food processing enterprises. When we speak about the micro food processing enterprises, there are many small scale food enterprises that are present in the rural areas. These present in the rural areas provide accommodation, employment to large number of people, but they are not formal in nature. They may pay taxes, they may not pay taxes, and at the same time the government also feels that then since they are ensuring that large number of people are employed, they should also be provided other incentives as well. They should also be provided support by the government as well, and at the same time these are currently not formalized. They have to be brought into the formalization mode, and as a result what we have is the government of India which has come up with a scheme called as Pradhana Mantri formalization of micro food processing enterprises. So the idea behind the scheme is to bring unorganized micro food enterprises into the organized framework. One, so that they are provided all the tax incentives. Two, there is more employment generation. Three, the government knows what is happening with this particular sector, so in case they require any support whatsoever, the government would be able to provide. So there are approximately 25 lakhs unorganized food processing units. These units contribute to 74% of employment in the food processing sector. 66% of such units are located in rural areas. So to provide them the support that is required, the government has earmarked about 10,000 crores to benefit 2 lakh micro food processing enterprises. The scheme aims to support micro food entrepreneurs, FPOs, self-help groups as well as the cooperatives. When we look into this particular scheme, we have to know some of the salient features. It is part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme. It is a centrally sponsored scheme, which means the state governments will also have to infuse certain amount of money. So when we speak about central sector scheme, this will be entirely funded by the central government, but when we speak about centrally sponsored scheme, you also have some amount of funding which will be provided by the state governments. The share of expenditure under the PMFM scheme is as follows: 60:40 between the central government and state governments and union territories with the legislature, 90:10 between central and northeastern and Himalayan states, 100% central assistance for UTs without legislatures. It will run for 5 years, 2020-21 to 2024-25, and the central government will pay the expenditure for the first year irrespective of who incurs it. Later it will be adjusted as per the ratio that we just discussed. The central government will provide funds to the state based on the approved project implementation plan. One district, one product approach plan will be implemented to encompass important procurement, common services availability and product marketing. The interministerial impact committee is established at the national level, and the structure includes chairman, Minister of Food Processing Industries, vice chairman, Minister of State Food Processing Industries, member secretary as well as the members. So this will basically have about 4 components: support to individual and groups of micro enterprises, branding and marketing support, support for strengthening the institutions, and setting up robust project management framework. All these components are part of this major scheme. So the PM formalization of micro food processing industry scheme has the following objectives: that they will be provided the technical knowledge, skill training and hand holding support services to be given, so that these are empowered over a period of time. They generate more revenue for themselves. They pay more taxes as well, which can be used for the social welfare schemes and programs, and ultimately more employment opportunities and more people will be empowered. technology upgradation of the existing micro food processing enterprises by increasing access to the credit to the entrepreneurs, a regulatory framework to encompass existing unorganized food processing enterprises to bring them into a formally compliant framework, and branding and marketing to be strengthened in order to support the integration of existing enterprises with the organized supply chains. These are some of the initiatives taken by the government of India with respect to the formalization of economy. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this topic. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.